Hello everyone, it's decklist. Today we are playing 4-color control. I was really into control lately and started playing the blue-white control with the binding splash, of course. And then after some experience with it, I saw that Orcish Bowmaster is definitely a problem for that kind of blue-white lists at the moment. And I feel like the blue-white lists are at their very high power level at the moment, nevertheless, especially Narset is doing well against opponents' one rings and locking one rings from the other side, definitely. But I think the Vrennen 6 does a really good job dealing with Orcish Bowmasters and also providing early threat that you can jam into the control matchups and also just providing you with the constant flow of lands. And together with Lorien Revealed, we get to play just a 21 land in a 4-color control list, which is, I think, amazing. And so far, in maybe around 15 matches played with it, I got a trophy in a second try with it. I had a 9-1 round. Deck felt very good so far in the 15 matches I played with it. Didn't have almost any mana issues. You will see in a trophy league in one game I had mana issues, but only because I kept a one lander. If I didn't keep one lander, definitely wouldn't have that. But uh, so far, as I said, didn't encounter real problems. You have a 21, just a 21 land, so your starting hand may have less lands, but you also sometimes will have one Lorien revealed in your hand together with one land, which will be enough to keep. So every Lorien revealed you get in your starting hand with a single second land. This means that hand is already keepable. Okay, so that is it. What's special about this version? I added some cards. So as I said, I started as a blue-white control deck, and I added Vrennen 6, and obviously when I added Vrennen 6, I had to add Omnat too. Uh, I had so other options in this now will be playing more Spell Pierces, which didn't feel like too good into Dimir control matchup, just playing more than two. I think the two spell pierce, two force of negation felt good, and I'm really happy with that number. I was surprised how good the touch of the spirit realm was in this deck. So actually, this touch is a 3 mana removal for opponent's ring. It removes all their creatures. It also is uncounterable 2 mana channel ability. You discard this, you bounce your one ring that is going to kill you. So you get to live, and you don't get the protection from everything because it's triggers on cast, but you get to blink the solitude, blink the subtlety from the sideboard. You get to blink the ring. You get to blink opponents' creatures like tokens or Murktides or whatever. And it works very well. I would be very happy to add a third Touch the Spirit Realm into the deck, but currently wasn't able to fit it in. So I had as another option for this deck, obviously, I had option to play some number of subtleties in the main, or third Spell Pierce, third Touch the Spirit, third Force of Negation, whatever, but I decided to test out Tamiyo Completed Sage. It's a Planeswalker from Kamigawa, and it has the Phyrexian ability, Phyrexian mana symbol, so you can play it either for 5 mana or 4 mana, and it's a great Planeswalker a lot of people forgot about already, which works very well with one ring, but also it works very well against one ring. So for, let's say, a 5 mana, you play this, it enters the battlefield with the 5 counters, you -4 and put the one ring from your graveyard into the battlefield. You can -for 3 put the touch of the spirit realm from your graveyard onto the battlefield, and the touch is like the easiest card in this deck to put into the graveyard because you just discard it for 2 mana. That's also partially the reason why I liked it, just being able to go -3 with Tamiyo and always have the touch available into your graveyard was very good. Bringing back Ren and 6 is also very cool and leaves a lot of counters on Tamiyo for the next turn. You also get so much cool permanents here like Teferi, Omnat, Solitude, the One Ring, whatever you bring in with Tamiyo, it's just incredibly powerful and it's never bricked so far. You will, however, board this card out in like very fast matchups, like for example Burn and where you don't need that much grind. And the One Ring and Omnat in that matchups provide just enough, and you get to make space for the cyber cards, of course. Okay, so this is it. So 8 counter spells in the main deck, 3 Teferis, 2 Supreme Verdicts, so a lot of these classic control pieces. And on the sideboard, I'm very happy with this part of the sideboard. I think this works great. Dress downs are so good. At the moment, dress down is one of the best sideboard cards. Shadows of the Void is always good in this kind of deck because I don't play almost any one drops except the Pierce. Pierce is very good at the moment, so I decided to go with the Pierce in the main. Third Pierce in the sideboard, one of Dispute, two Subtleties, and Kahira. Subtlety is also very uh, desirable sideboard card at the moment. Temporary Lockdown, one of the best cards to play against Hammer Time, and it also works against Shadow decks. But it's also decent against Rhinos. So the 4 cards that I'm don't really like that much are definitely Prismatic Endings and Hallowed Moonlight. So there is I mean, Prismatic Ending was definitely good, but I am currently debating about going either Prismatic Ending or Celestial Purge. So far, I have been putting Prismatic Ending in the main deck when I am on the draw, and I usually don't put it in on the play because on the play I have Brennan 6 to deal with the Ragavan and the similar stuff. Hallowed Moonlight also not my favorite choice. I think I will look for uh, other stuff I can replace it, but for the moment I think it does a decent job. There are some few choices I can play instead of this. Even endurance is an option at this moment, but yeah, so there's no really graveyard hate at this moment in there. And Hello Moonlight seemed like a best option. I think it is okay, but you can also play like more Spell Pierces or Flusterstorms in this slot. Maybe Endurance also. That is it. Okay, so but for now I will keep these 15, and with the game, with more gameplay, I'll think about possible changes. But this is my current list that performed very well for me in the leagues. I had a 9-1 run the other day, and it felt very powerful. So we'll now go through the gameplay and see how it went. Okay, this is match one. In match one, playing first, I had to mulligan this one. I kept pretty decent 6 cards. Uh, Counterspell, Teferi, Leyline Binding. I started against Red Black Scam with mulligan to 6. My opponent immediately got rid of my Leyline Binding and Counterspell, and left Teferi in my hand. They left Teferi because they had Totsis on their turn. So they started attacking me, but I top deck touch the Spirit Realm to get rid of the Grief. If this was Prismatic Ending, I would not be able to do this. But my opponent, I did a Brand 6 and I thought like I'm in good situation. My opponent only has one land, but they had the Fury scam and they top decked a second one. So I play both Kahira and Brennan 6, but opponent has a removal for my Kahira to finish me, so that was game 1 against Scam. So they had a pretty good hand. Turn 1 Scam Grief, and then when I stabilized, they scammed the Fury. Okay, so sometimes this is going to happen, but I think this is fine for a control deck. You still have Solitude for interaction, and even have the touch to go turn 3 Solitude Blink. So I find basic with the first Lorien revealed, and then assess the situation, try to see if opponent will go for the Blood Moon or not. They go for the Ragavan Dash. I find another land. And I see no danger of this Ragavan connecting in this situation. But I didn't really want to let opponent scam the grief, so I now decide to pitch cast my Solitude. Then on my turn, opponent goes for the Turak, which was pretty good play for them. I was able to get land back to be able to recast the Omnat next turn, but my opponent was able to kill the Vren and also play the Ragavan and play the Doughty, and I would say this is at this moment a very unfavorable situation for me. But at least I was able to cast the Omnat. I got the draw, the double counter spell. Okay, so my opponent got the Fury Scam and replayed my Omnat, and I think basically at this point I didn't really believe I could win this, but yeah, here is the One Ring, and the One Ring did basically all the job. Yeah, you just topped in. It was impossible situation. I don't think I rarely win out of such a bad situation like this one. Okay, so I passed the turn. I had the outs here. So I go into opponent's turn, and this is like, yeah, I think first a lot of players would concede this situation, maybe not even bother playing, but yeah, getting the One Ring. This is what I see happening a lot. So I play the dress down first. This means Fury loses the double strike, so it's not 8 damage, it's just 4. And I draw the Touch the Spirit Realm from the dress down, which is great because they stole my Omnat. So I use this Leyline Binding to kill, to exile the Turak, which has pro white usually, so I can't remove it unless I have dress down on the field. And I bounce my Omnat, and they again go for the Turak, but I now I had dress down on the field, so Turak did nothing. I went for the second ring, gained a lot of life with the Omnat, put the Leyline Binding into my hand by bouncing Turak, uh, bouncing the Leyline Binding which had other Turak below. So I let them keep one of the Turaks, but also got the Leyline Binding in my hand to get rid of the Fury. And yeah, so now I was running out of the fetchable, so I was in a dilemma. Will I play the Supreme Verdict or not? Because I didn't have any more solutions for this Turak. At the moment, I had plenty of counterspells, so I was in a decent position. I was forced to discard cards from my hand, which made Turak bigger and bigger over time, which was going to become a problem. Because I was taking damage from the One Ring, I was taking damage from Turak. There is also a chance they discard more of my cards, so. And by the time I only have 20 cards in this in the deck at the moment, and I will keep drawing and I will keep discarding. So I should have gone for the verdict earlier, I think, but I tried to raise. I think racing is decent here, but yeah, I don't want to, didn't want to let them get any top deck in a crazy top decks. So I attacked for one more turn and then decided to gain some life. I attacked again and then decided to use the Supreme Verdict. I was running out of the fetchables for the next turn to continue gaining a lot of life with the Omnat. So I decided I have unbeatable hand and I just want to play this, get rid of that Turek with a verdict and then continue playing my other cards and just win with this Solitude and counter spells. I think this was a good decision. I'm just sorry I didn't do this before. Should have done this a bit before, but it was still fine. Okay, so there was no need of drawing anything. Had a Solitude to continue attacking. I had a force to, of negation to protect it. I had also Brennan 6 ability for the next turn. My opponent played the Doughty and Tutsis. I used the Force of Negation to hide Solitude in my hand. They went for the attack, so I used this situation to play the Solitude and get rid of the Doughty, block one of their elementals attacking Brennan 6. And then just continue attacking with the Solitudes, get the Vren ulti to get access to the counter spells on the sideboard, and play another ring and just attack for 6, putting my opponent on one turn clock with using subtlety in my hand to finish them off, and that was the game. A pretty amazing game, which I won out of very hard situation. Extremely hard, I would say. So, starting with the one lander in a game 3, but I had a Lorien revealed. So this is the situation I was talking about. Obviously, this will happen, and I was okay with keeping a hand like this one. I got rid of the Ragavan. Opponent played the Bowmasters, but they were stuck on lands, which definitely helped me. Already had the island and the forest. I used ending to get rid of their Bowmasters, which was pretty good for me. So I played the Triumph, I got rid of the Ragavan and hold the Dress Down counterspell for their turn. I would say this situation, unless they have something really crazy, it is a game over. So I got to play the One Ring, I have double Force of Negation, I have Solitude, Counterspell, a lot of stuff there, definitely. Okay, so I draw more cards. My opponent with their deck doesn't have many solution for the One Ring. I was able to play the Solitude, exile the army token, and try to start attacking. Use the Force of Negation for their Totsis. They went for the Fury just to kill the Solitude, which was fine by me. No big problems. I find another land with a Lorien revealed, bounce the ring with the fairy, and pass the turn holding the counterspell. So at this point, I was just okay holding counterspell, then playing creatures. End of turn. First, I went for the Solitude to start gaining life. And yeah, this is. Yeah, I have 7 lands. My opponent still has 1 land, which is pretty incredible. It's turn 10 and they only got their second land now. It was really bad hand from my opponent. They were trying to play it out, but at this point I just had too much stuff. And yeah, so I just did the control deck stuff and just finished the game, and it wasn't a big problem. I had dress down and Leyline Binding to get rid of Turak and win in a few turns, so that was it. Let's go on to the next one. Okay, so this was the one hand I was talking about where I was mana screwed, color screwed, sorry, because I kept one lander. Obviously, this is not a very good keep. I kept it kind of for science. I think this was like a second match with this deck for me. So I had the touch and the solitude. So I had like I could probably do a couple of turns without even top decking a land. But if they went to play some creatures, I had the ability to go for the solitude, a pitch cast, and then a blink it with a touch. Also, if I get another land, I have 3 ley lines, which is pretty good. Also, any fetch enables my Brennan 6. It was EZ control. My opponent was playing EZ control with the Flame of Fener. They played some Snapcasters. So I get to know my opponent's deck and finally find a third land on turn 5. Unfortunately for this game, it was a bit too late. My opponent has too much stuff, and especially this Reptile Laboratory can be pretty good in this type of deck. I also got a fourth land at this point, but yeah, my opponent was had too much advantage. I was discarding my cards for a couple of turns, not doing anything, and gave them enough time to find good cards in their hand, like these Flame of Feiners, Snapcasters to replay them with the Reptile Lab on the field, and plenty of mana to use it. So I got the Lorien, I got the fifth land, but as I said, it was already a bit too late. I had the ring and the force, but yeah, the chances of them not having interaction were pretty low. They went for another Flame of Fener, but um, I decided to use force here. And yeah, so basically, I tried to play the ring next turn, they countered it, and I conceded the game. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Okay, so Gen kept 6, decided to keep a double Vren 6 in case they counter the first one. So it is a control matchup, and I really want to. Vren 6 is really good in a control matchup. So I decided to go for basic here in case they playing the moon and immediately go for the Vren 6. This means if they counter it this turn, I have opportunity to maybe draw a third land naturally next turn and then try to play Vren 6 protected with Spell Pierce, but I resolved Vren 6 immediately on turn 2, which was incredible. They tried to bounce the Vren 6, but I used the Spell Pierce to counter the Brazen Borrower completely. And yeah, so now this was great game for me. I was able to have plenty of lands here. I just start casting my spells. I have so many of them, so many good ones. Also, Bran is already on 6. They got to take care of it, and they trying to do something with it. They try to attack the Bran 6, so they got to play the Snapcaster just for the attacks, but obviously that hurts them a bit too. They lose a lot of value like playing like this. I decided to use my Vran 6 to ping the Snapcaster. I was fine with them using the disputes, whatever. So I had another. I top decked the spell pierce to resolve my Renan 6, and then they didn't have a response, which means I was able to play the Misty, get the mana, get the 4 mana, and to try to resolve my Wandering. They didn't have a spell pierce in their hands, so basically it is now very hard situation for the opponent. I also have the Renan 6 for the next turn, plus the Wandering, and yeah, so almost impossible, I would say, for the opponent. Continue attacking with the Omnat, gaining life. They finally found some lands, but it was already too late because I drew too much cards with one ring already and had a pretty strong hand. So my opponent played for one more turn, but yeah, there just wasn't much they can do here, and they concede. Okay, so that is it. Let's now check the last game of this match. So in the last game I was playing the second, which is definitely harder, but I think I have overall a better, stronger deck, and have a lot of free interaction, good hand, double counter spell pierce, force of negation, the fairy, solitude, all very good cards. And yeah, the key was finding the lands. But I do play 21 plus 3 Lorien revealed, which each gets me the land. So I have a normal chance of top decking the land like in any build. So it is totally fine in my experience so far. Opponent goes for the Flame of Fener. I decide to use the spell pierce and still hold the counterspell plus force of negation for their turn. I think this is pretty good position for me. I decided to shock in with the pool, holding double counterspell. And but my opponent just doesn't have any really strong spells they can resolve at the moment to change the late game and change the course of this one. They go for the Archmage Charm. I decide to fight over this card row and use the counterspell, but still holding a second one and the force for on their turn. So pretty good situation. I didn't draw into more lands, but I had enough of them. 4 was plenty for this type of hand. I had plenty of cheap interaction. Binding is 1 mana, Solitude can be 0, Force of Negation. So I played Force, I still have a played the counter spell, I still have a Force as a backup. And yeah, so I didn't have much to hold mana at this point, so I decided just to play out the One Ring. They played a bunch of their... so they didn't have much cards at this point, so I was able to resolve the One Ring and 8 cards. I can have 8 cards in hand at this point, and opponent is just on 4. So almost impossible, almost impossible situation for the opponent. Opponent plays the dispute. In response, I draw 2 with the One Ring and find a dispute of my own to counter their draw 3 cards. Also find another land. My life total was very high, so I didn't have any problems with that. Now also find the Omnat. I play the island, start gaining life, and again holding a counterspell, and all the solitudes, and the opponent just decides to concede the match. That was the game. Okay, so that was the second match, and we can now go on to the third match. Pretty long games, obviously, playing control is definitely a lot different than aggro, and the matches can really go long. I think my first league, sorry, the second league I played with this deck just went incredibly long. It was one of the longest leagues. Didn't have any interaction at this moment, just a force of negation. I decided not to use the Lorien because I needed to hold it for the force. Opponent, I was playing against Rhinos, and I find succeeded to resolve the Venom 6, and I was holding the force of negation for their turn. I was hoping them playing the Shardless. They went for the Fury first to get rid of my Venom 6, and then try to resolve the Cascade. But I had the Force there, and I also had the One Ring in my hand for my turn. So in case they don't have the force of their own, I'm in a pretty good situation. So I resolve this. I also have Omnat plus double Solitude in hand. It is, yeah. At this situation, basically unwinnable for the opponent. They did have Murktide though. So I draw two more cards with the One Ring. I was looking for another white spell. I did find a Binding, so I decided to pitch cast the second Solitude. Immediately get rid of the Murktide, and I also put the second Solitude, which they use the Subtlety on the top of my library. Opponent shocked in with the Steam Vents, which was kind of saying they probably have a Subtlety in their hand. So I decided to go for the second One Ring, just prevent the life loss to not get into the danger, and use my second One Ring to draw more. Okay, so as I said, I was expecting them having the subtlety, so when I top decked the counter spell, it was very good time to try to play the Omnat. They had the subtlety, of course, and then I used the counter spell, and at which point my opponent conceded the game. So that was game one against Rhinos, so let's check out game two. Obviously, Rhinos, when playing first, they're pretty aggressive and not easy to play against. I did have a decent hand. There is a Verdict. I had the Teferi, I had Solitude, the One Ring. A lot of good cards. Obviously, for all of this to work, I need my lands. And they also play Blood Moon in their deck, so it can be problematic for the 5-color deck. I did not get my third land at this point, so I was in a need of a top deck. Opponent went for the suspend on the footfalls and passed the turn. Didn't have any counter spells, didn't have any spell pierce. It is definitely much harder when you have these cards. I top decked the second Teferi, but I didn't get the mana to play it. So it was just one of those games when you get the mana screw. But incredibly, my opponent didn't have. They didn't play anything last turn, so they gave me more time to do something. They resolved their suspended rhinos. But all of this, it was fine. I had plenty of solutions in my hand. I mean, if I top deck land for the verdict, I'm in such a good position. But I decided to play I decided to play Leyland Binding anyway in case I don't. For a situation like this, they use the Commandeer, so Rhinos now play the Commandeer because of the Wandering. It was all similar situation to when a Cascade into Valky was a thing. So that was the last time they played the Commandeer, and I tried to resolve my second Teferi. I had Solitude to kill the Rhino here to survive the turn, but it was a pretty bad situation for me. Opponent also had a Teferi, my Teferi, and yeah, I was able to play the Verdict, but they had the Subtlety to finish me off, and yeah, that was it. I finally stabilized with the Verdict. It was actually a decent position. I had one ring for the next turn, but yeah, their Subtlety end of turn finished me off. But now playing first, it is much easier. I have the Lorien revealed in my hand to find the second land needed to cast the Vrana 6. And Vrana 6 in this situation completely resolves my need for the mana for the rest of the game. So I go for the Vrana 6 in case they don't have Force. I'm good, but again they play Commandeer, but I mean they used 3 cards to get rid of the Vrana 6 and they got it, but they didn't have fetches themselves. So it wasn't that good for them at this moment. I had a double Lorien revealed to get more lands, and I also holded a Spell Pierce entire time. I decided to use both Lorien revealed immediately and find a double white. I didn't want to risk them getting a fetch land and then returning the fetch land with Ren, so I decided to use the Leyland Binding immediately. My opponent was in a pretty bad situation, and even if they get the land, I still had opportunity to play the Spell Pierce, and yeah, so they finally played their cycle the Lorien revealed. They find Shocking and Steam Vents, so finally they have a 3 mana to cast their spell. But now I have a Spell Pierce, and I also find a double Spell Pierce with the Verdict and the Omnat in my hand. I would say this is pretty good. So I was in a bit of danger here because my opponent played the Blood Moon next turn with the blue mana backup. I had my Pierce, but I was in a danger of them having the Dispute. I would still be able to fetch before Blood Moon hits, but I didn't have green mana at the moment, which was necessary for me to play Omnat and Kahira. So finally they resolved their rhinos from the cascade, and I decided it's best to go with the verdict, hold the solitude, and have a pretty good hand for next turn. There is the Omnat, and I also top decked the binding. Opponent goes for the subtlety. That was the last card in their hand. So I used the binding. I did put the Omnat again on the top of my library. And then next turn I'm untapping with Solitude, Omnat, and Kahira, and feel pretty much unbeatable. Opponent goes for the Questing Beast, which is not a problem because I have the Solitude and have the Omnat, so yeah, it doesn't do much. So opponent suspends the Footfalls, and I think they played for one more turn. When I replayed the Omnat, got the Lens, I played the Kahira, attacked with Solitude. They wait for their turn to top deck a card and conceded the game. Yeah, so that was it. good games against Rhinos. So let's go on to the match 4. This is a medium hand. I have a double counter spell. I have the double binding, but I'm missing a land to make this hand much better. So the fetch was a perfect top deck in this situation. I was able to go for the Leyline Binding, get rid of the Swiss Spear, and then untap, play the Steam Vents tapped, and hold the counterspell. I think this is a pretty good start for me. I decided to go for the Steam Vents, and immediately counterspell the Rift Bolt. So this way, if they have like other spells in their hand which require them making damage to play it, they cost more mana, so they will be a bit slower. And now I play the Temple Garden tapped. Again, I use the counterspell for their Rift Bolt because I want to use my entire mana on my turn to go for the Tamiyo. Also, they played the Vortex, which I was able to remove immediately with the Binding, untap with Tamiyo, and yeah, just try to go for the Tamiyo's ulti to start drawing cards with it and secure this game. Opponent was also on one card at a point, and I had enough life. So this was one of rare situations where I just didn't have anything in my graveyard to reanimate with Tamiyo. It doesn't happen very often. Much more often, I have something, and I can use this immediately. But yeah, this time I didn't have it, but still I was able to use the Tamiyo to prevent Spear from untapping. And this means Tamiyo is now on 7 loyalty, which enables their ultimate for the next turn, which makes me draw additional card every turn, and my spells cost 2 less to cast. So I use my Tamiya to prevent Spear untapping. I play the Venom 6, I put Kahira in my hand and pass the turn. Obviously, I'm in danger of losing if my opponent top decks 2 burn spells. They have 1 card in hand, 1 mystery card. So if it's a burn spell and they top deck another one, I can easily die. But obviously, it wasn't what they needed, because they just passed the turn after sacking the Sunback Canyon. And on my turn, I used the Tamiyo's ultimate. Okay, sometimes, yeah, this video just blocks. I played the Omnat, and yeah, as soon as I cast the Omnat, opponent concedes, and that was it. Okay, so easy game 1 against Burn. Just staying on a high life total, waiting for the Omnat top deck, and eventually finding it and sealing the game. Okay, so this game, I think this is a pretty good one. Spell Pierce, Renan 6, Omnat. I have everything I need to win, and to Spell Pierce to try to delay their win. Also, I need some top deck to survive their aggro start. The One Ring top deck wasn't very good. I decided to let this spike resolve and attack me for 2. I really wanted to find Yeskai Charm to maybe cast Brennan 6 to set up for the Omnat turn, or depending on my top deck, maybe just hold Spell Pierce is also fine. Uh, my opponent, luckily for me, I mean, I was playing a second this game, but had a mana screw, so they were stuck on one land, so they weren't very aggressive. I had enough time to stabilize, and my top deck was Leyland Binding here, so that's why I decided to go for another Triumph and just get rid of this Monastery Spear. And the next turn I played the island, I played Wrenn 6 and hold the Spell Pierce entire time. Opponent is still on one land, and yeah, considering I have the Spell Pierce here and I'm still on 12, I will probably have enough time to get to turn 5, untap with Omelette and win the game. Opponent still turn 4. They didn't find the land they needed. And yeah, so I had option to go for the ring at this moment, but I top deck counterspell, so I decided it's not necessary to play it. I'll just hold the counterspell. They are not able to do much with me holding it. I maybe should have played it, but yeah. So even now I'm in such a good situation. I don't need to hurry anything. I was able to play the One Ring with the Spell Pierce backup. So through their entire turn, I have a protection from everything, and I have the Spell Pierce to prevent them from burning me on my turn. So it was the ideal play, and I was in no danger on their turn. No real danger, actually. So they did find a rolling vortex, and that this means that I untap, play the Omnat, and win the game. So that was it. I just casted the Omnat, and the game opponent again conceded. Okay, so let's check out the last match of this league. Again, I would say I kind of love this type of hands. It is my favorite type. Two counter spells and binding. So a lot of cheap interaction when you also include the Solitude and Wrenn 6. This is almost like the ideal hand. It doesn't get much better than this. I tried to uh, I tried to resolve the Wrenn 6 immediately. I didn't succeed. I find a third land. This was a good top deck, and I tried to play this aggressively. I went for another Planeswalker on my turn, which they all also countered. Then they played the Lorien Revealed on their turn. Uh, I used a Binding to cast Binding to kill the Shadow. I used the counter spell on the second Shadow, and they played the 8/8 Murktide, and it was ideal for my hand. And I had a Solitude to get rid of the Murktide, and they immediately conceded the game. I had just too much stuff. Also, the One Ring and counterspell in hand. It was too much for the opponent. Okay, so they conceded immediately after me killing all their creatures. And yeah, so we can now check out the last game of this league. I boarded in the lockdowns, so they can be good against shadows. Also, I think my opponent was playing the Bowmasters. They decided to get rid of the Dispute and the Wrenn 6, which means they're probably planning for the Murktide. I played my Solitude, kill their, exile their Murktide, and still hold the counterspell. Also had a lockdown in case they go for the Death Shadow or the Bowmaster. Opponent tries to play the second Murktide, but I have the counterspell. I also go for the Teferi, immediately minus it, draw a card, but opponent had the Bowmasters to get rid of it, and I use finally the lockdown to remove the Bowmaster. I was also stuck on 3 lands for a long time this game, but I didn't I have all the cheap attractions, so didn't need it that much, and I've finally found more lands when I needed them. So I play the One Ring here, and I had the binding to remove the Bowmaster. So they don't have a really solution for the One Ring. And I also had the protection to resolve my Omnat. And with the One Ring, this basically means the game is over. I didn't have a good hand at this point, just a bunch of lands and the Kahira, but it's still very hard for them to do anything. I top deck the Solitude to kill the Bowmaster, then draw more cards with One Ring, and yeah, so that was it. They try to kill Omnat, I blink it, and they concede the game. Yeah, they didn't concede it. I think they conceded it on the next turn. And they didn't even consider it. I had a lethal. So that was it. Okay, that was the entire league with this great deck. I think Tamio, you maybe didn't see Tamio much in action in this league, but I used it, played against more ring decks in other leagues I played with this deck, and it was very useful there, tapping my opponent's One Rings or rebuying my permanents from the graveyard. This play basically never happened in this entire league. I just didn't draw that much into Tamiya, but it was very useful. I just want to inform that it was very useful to me when I played with it in the other leagues, especially in the control matchup. And it was really nice. I'm sorry you wasn't able to see the full shine of Tamiyo in this league, but it is what it is. I hope you still enjoy the gameplay. That is it for today. If you want to help the channel, click like, click subscribe, comment in the video, and goodbye.